Hello, and welcome back to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and today we are dealing with staff tool strategies again. We're going to start looking at staff and group names, which, as you probably know, are the labels to the left of each system telling you which instrument is on which staff. So the main place that we're going to do this is actually in the score manager. If you open up your score manager, you'll see all of your instruments listed on the left here, and the name of the instruments are listed on the right. Now, the instruments here on the left do not have to have the same name as what you see here, so you can customize the actual names. And already out of the box, the way that Finale will set this up is that in some cases it will number the names. So you'll see here we see flute, but it's actually flute 1. We see flute here, but it's actually flute 2. I'll get into that in a second. But the principle here is that Finale will call this instrument flute, but you can call it whatever you want. And how you call it whatever you want is determined by what you do in the bottom left corner here, where it says full name, abbreviated name, and this option for auto number style. So changing the name of an instrument is rather easy. If you go, let's say we're going to look at this English horn part and we want to call it cor anglais instead, right? So it says this is, Finale considers this the English horn instrument, and out of the box it's going to call it English horn. But we can simply just change the full name here, and when you click the full name button, you'll get the edit text window. Now this edit text window will work pretty much like any other text window in Finale. It will give you this text menu up here, and you can choose different fonts or sizes or styles or whatever you need to do for this particular text window. But in this case, all I'm going to do is just retype a new name. If I can spell it. There we go, cor anglais. And click OK. And now I've just changed the full name. And we can do the abbreviated name as well. And here I'm going to call it C period A period. And click OK. And all I've done is just change the name of the English horn. And again, you'll see in the instrument list here, Finale still considers this the English horn instrument. That's what it calls it. But you're calling it cor anglais, which is totally fine. We can do that. And as soon as we click out of the score manager, you'll see that the cor anglais label will be put where the English horn was, right? And also the abbreviated name C period A will appear as well. Now let's start talking about that auto number style. Now the auto numbering is what's allowing Finale to put the numbers for instruments that are identical, and they do have to be identical. So the way that Finale considers them identical is by the instrument column. So you'll see that the flute and the flute here are the same. If this was like a flute and a piccolo or something, and for some reason I decided to call it a flute and a flute, it would not auto number these, because again, it's just considering this part of it. In fact, we could also change the name here of any of these instruments. So I can call the flute 1 here, I can call it fluty, and you'll see that it will still say fluty 1, flute 2. So really the auto number is referencing the actual instrument itself and whether or not those instruments are identical. Now there's several different number styles. There's a pull down menu here, and you can choose whichever auto number style you want on every single staff. Now out of the box, Finale is going to give you the instrument 1 with the Arabic numerals here, but you can choose Roman numerals. You can choose to list it as first, second, or third, whatever the instrument is, or you can choose it as instrument A, B, C, D, etc. Or you can choose this option, which would be 1 period instrument, 2 period instrument. So there's a lot of different auto number styles that you can choose from. And again, Finale out of the box will choose the first one, except for the strings, which it will use the Roman numerals, which is the second option here. This is just sort of the standard way of doing this, but if you don't like this, you could always go back and change the violins to the regular Arabic numerals here, just by doing that. And interestingly, you do have to change it in both places. Otherwise, you will get one that says Arabic numeral 1 and the next one that says Roman numeral 2. So just be aware of that. Now, one common thing that happens with strings in particular is that there is actually 2 different string instruments that you can choose from. Now, what I have set up here is the section instrument, so violin section, violin section. But if you go into the strings instruments here, there is a violin, which Finale considers a solo violin. So if you choose the violin, you'll still see violin in the name for both the solo violin and the violin section. So it looks like this should get auto-numbered as 1 and 2. But again, because Finale considers this 2 separate or 2 distinct instruments, it's not going to auto label this. So only when you choose the violin section in this case, instead of the solo violin, then it will use the auto numbering. This is a common thing I run into. You just have to be careful about using the violin versus the violin section when you're adding instruments. Now, again, out of the box, when you add instruments, particularly with the setup wizard, Finale is going to do this all the correct way anyway. So 9 times out of 10, you won't have to worry about this. It's just when you're adding instruments and stuff that you have to be careful, or if you're, manipulating the staff names. Now, another interesting thing that could occur is that with your horn parts, a lot of times you'd want to see horn 1 and 3 and then horn 2 and 4. Well, the auto number style is not going to be able to deal with this because, literally the auto numbering is just going to look at this and say it's one horn instrument, it's a second horn instrument. And actually, if I auto numbered this, it would list it as horn 1 and 2. Now, what I've done here, you'll see that it actually says horn 1/3 and horns 2/4. So I had to uncheck the auto number style for this and then manually change the full name here so that it says horn in F1/3. Same with the abbreviated name, and in the second staff, horn in F2/4, HN 2/4. So with your horn parts, if you're going to lay them out like this, those names have to be a little bit more manually adjusted without using the auto number style. Now, all the instruments that only have one staff will get these staff labels, and these are called staff names. But there is something called group names, and for instruments that get grand staff, like the piano, you'll notice that the name of the piano here is in blue versus black, which is what the staff names color is. The blue group names are slightly different. They behave slightly differently. However, within the score manager, you can still change the names here, and that will be reflected in the group name here as well. Now, the handy thing is that when you make changes in the score manager to the names, let's go in here again and say Flutie, it will also update the name of the linked part. So if we go into our edit parts here, you'll now see that it says Flutie 1 versus flute. This said Flute 1 before. Also, when you go into that part, you'll see that the staff label at the top will also say Flutie 1. So everything's being updated all at the same time. It also will do the same thing if you change the instruments that have group names. If I were to call this piano forte, it will also update the name of the piano part to piano forte. Now, there's a weird thing with the instruments that use group names as opposed to staff names. It will not appear as piano forte here until you do something. I find this weird. You have to actually go into the manage parts window. You don't even have to do anything in here. Just open it and then close it. And then all of a sudden it will appear correctly in this edit part list. So that's a little bit of a strange oddity/bug, but it does get updated correctly eventually. Now, the one caveat to all of this is that if you do go into the Manage Parts window and manually change the names here to whatever it is you're going to do, so let's say I change Flutie 1 to, let's just call this Reed 1. And then go to the part, Reed 1. It's going to say Reed 1. Now that you've manually called this part something else, it doesn't matter what you do in the score manager as far as changing the names here. I can change this back to flute. And again, the label will appear correctly, or will change correctly. So now you see Flute 1. However, the part name Reed 1 that I've called here will remain. So what's happening here is as soon as you manually change the part name in the Manage Parts window, basically the part name becomes unlinked from the staff label that you may or may not choose within the score manager, if that makes sense. It's kind of difficult to understand that this is happening because there's nowhere that indicates this. There's nothing that says that this name is now unconnected from the actual part name, but that's exactly what's going on. It's only when you make a manual change in the Manage Parts window to the name where all of a sudden everything becomes unlinked. So just be careful about that as you're changing these names. Since we're talking about linked parts, let's just look at the actual staff labels for the instruments in linked parts. Now, this has to do with something in the staff attributes. So if you click into the staff attributes for Flute 1, what you'll notice here in the items to display section is that you will see staff name in score checked, but staff name in parts unchecked. So this is a unique situation where it's allowing the part name to be suppressed from the linked parts, which is the normal situation. You don't usually want to see the staff name in the parts. However, if you select that option, then we'll go into that flute part, which I've now renamed Read 1. Now you can actually see the Flute 1 label and all the abbreviated names in this part as well. Now, of course, this is screwed up because the margins are not going to work for this, but this is how you would do this. Now, again, this is not usual for instrumental parts like this. However, this may come in handy if you have a linked part that's, say, a choir reduction or something. If you have a choir in your score, and then you wanted a link part that showed just the piano part and the soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, you're going to want to have those soprano, alto, tenor, bass labels in the linked part as well. So this is where you'd actually have to do this. Again, I don't have any chorus parts in this particular score, but if I did for the soprano part, I'd have to go in here and make sure that the staff name in parts is selected. That's what would allow me to see that in the linked parts. It works a little bit differently for group names if you need to do something like this, because if you were watching the group videos, you'll know that the groups get created or the groups get copied when the linked parts get generated from the score into the linked parts. What that means is that once the linked part has been generated, which it has in this case with this piano forte part, these groups are different, and the group names actually exist in the group attributes for that group. And again, because they're unlinked, they're actually two separate group attributes for the score and the part. Now, in this case, you see the group attribute here says piano forte. However, if I go to the linked parts for the piano forte, you will see that it's not saying pianoforte because this group is unique. It's not the same group. It's not linked to the score. So when I had this set up, I had the regular piano group name listed initially, and then the part got generated. So now this group is unique, or it's independent rather, and it's still saying piano. It also says show group name, which is how Finale sets this up, which I don't think is a great thing. When you generate a linked part, it will show the group name, which I really probably shouldn't have selected there. So you can always go into this part and into that group attribute and make sure that show group name is unchecked for this. Now, if you wanted to show the full group name and you wanted this to be pianoforte, just like the score, then you would have to manually change it here and also show group name here. And interestingly, the one advantage here is that we do have the option to actually not show the abbreviated name in the parts if we wanted to. So here I could actually just edit the abbreviated names and just delete it so it's blank. And this will allow me to just show the full group name and not the abbreviated name if you wanted to do something like that. Otherwise, with the staff names, you kind of only have the option to show both the full name and the abbreviated name in the score or in the part. You can't kind of separate it out like you can with the group names a little bit. It gets a little bit confusing, but hopefully what I've just explained makes sense in that regard. Now, there is sort of another way / easier way to change these names without having to go into the score manager. If you're in the staff tool, you can right click any of these handles here on the staff names, and one of the options here is edit full staff name. Now, if I were to right click a name on an abbreviated name here, it would tell me to edit the abbreviated staff name. So you'll actually get two different options depending on which name you select. From here, we can this will take you directly to the edit text box that you would have gotten to if you had gone through the score manager. So from here, I can do Flutie again, and it will change to Flutie 1, all right? And I believe that will also update. Oh, well, I have to do that on Flute 2 because, again, I had already manually changed the Flute 1 part name to Read 1. So if I were to do that here, where I haven't made the manual change, call this Flutie. And an odd thing happens when I do it this way. The edit part menu here will still show flute 2. It will not show fluty 2. However, if you actually go to that part, it will show fluty 2. So it did get updated. What's weird about this is that for some reason it does not edit the part name in the part list here, oddly, until you go into the manage part window, and it will show you that it's named correctly, Fluty 2. And then as soon as you click OK, then it updates to the correct name here. So that's a little bit of a strange oddity when you're changing the name in that manner. I mean, it does it correctly, but it just doesn't update that name in the edit part list until you actually go into the manage parts window. I don't have an explanation for that, but that's just what's going on. And the same situation sort of applies if you were to try and do that on a group name. It will, change the part name as well. Assuming you haven't made a manual change to the part name, then it will update as well. In addition to right-clicking and finding the edit full staff name here, we can actually just hold down Option and double-click, and that brings us to the same window again. So just either right-click to find that option, edit full staff name or abbreviated staff name if you're doing it over here, or just Option double-click, and it will bring you to that window as well. So just a couple different options going on there to change the name. And let's see, the next thing I want to talk about is instrument changes. So if you're using instrument changes, Finale will kind of do this correctly for you as far as changing the staff labels, the staff name labels for you. So we can go into here. Let's say we're going to change the B flat clarinet 1 here to, I don't know, let's put it, I don't know, let's make it a clarinet in E flat. Why not? Click OK. And it will appropriately change the label to E flat clarinet. It, of course, will change the transpositions as needed and everything. The interesting thing here is that it will also retain the number 2 here for the second B flat clarinet, but it will not put the number 1 for the E flat clarinet. Now, let's look at the score manager to see what's going on here. You can see that it's not like it added an instrument to the main part here, but that E-flat clarinet does exist if you open up this triangle for clarinet and B-flat 1 here. You can see that the E-flat clarinet is now listed down here. This has to do with instrument changes. It will also tell you eventually where, if I had the right view thing here, you can see where the start measure is for that instrument. So there's a lot going on here, but when you open up this triangle, you do have the option of selecting this instrument and changing the name here. The interesting thing is that with these instrument changed instruments that are listed like this, they will not adhere to the auto numbering style, even if you have it checked. In fact, if I were to go in here and change the second one to E flat clarinet as well, change instrument to clarinet and E flat, you'll see that it will get the appropriate labels. However, it will not put the numbers 1 and 2 there, which is a little bit unfortunate. If you needed to all of a sudden also label this E flat clarinet and E flat 1, clarinet and E flat 2, then you would actually have to go in here into the full names and put number 1 and number 2 here. So just a little bit of a weird thing that the changed instruments will not actually adhere to the auto numbering. And a couple more things having to do with staff labels here, staff name labels. It is possible to use staff styles to override the staff name in any measure or any system that you would want to do that. So what I'm going to do here, just in my bassoon part, I'm going to define a new staff style, and I'm going to say new, and I'm just going to call this new name. And what I'm going to do in the top section here, there's an option for full staff and abbreviated staff name. Now, in any staff style, if these are unchecked, then it's not going to deal with those staff names. It's just going to leave them alone. However, if you check one of these or both of these, it's going to change whatever the staff name is on that measure to whatever you choose here. And so I can go in here and call this something else. We can call this Jake. I don't know why. We're just going to call it Jake. And the abbreviated name here could be J, right? This is a bassoon part, so this makes absolutely no sense, but I'm just going to call this, actually we'll call this Jake name, staff name, or whatever you want to say there. Click OK. And then you actually don't even need to apply it to the whole system here. You can really just apply it to a single measure so long as that measure is the first measure of that system. And we can just choose Jake name, and you'll see that because it's using the abbreviated name, it's going to put the J. And it will also adhere to the auto numbering style. So not only does it say J, it says J1. Now, this is kind of not sensical for an orchestral score like this. However, if I was doing a musical, and I do this quite often, I had a single vocal line that kept switching characters, this would be the way to do it. So I could put Jake in, for 8 bars, and then I could put Mary for 8 bars, and then I could put another name for 8 bars, or whatever the case may be. So I could keep creating different staff styles with different names for the instrument labels, if that makes sense. And that's exactly how I would do that. The other way to use this is that if for some reason you wanted to just not show the staff label for a certain number of measures, you could do that as well, almost the same way. Just create a new staff style. Let's call this blank staff name. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to check the full staff name and abbreviated staff name options here, but I'm not going to put anything in the text fields here. So I'm just going to leave these blank. And what that's going to do is force Finale to put a blank staff name wherever you apply the staff style. So I click OK because I've just defined it. And now I can choose blank staff name. And you'll see that that blank staff name is overriding the normal staff name that would appear here. So you can you kind of eliminate the staff name on a system-by-system basis if you need to do something like that. That's exactly how you would do that. And then finally, the last thing I'm going to talk about today is the options in the staff tool towards the bottom here called Show Default Staff Names and Show Default Group Names. With Show Default Staff Names checked, nothing major happens except for the instruments that don't show the staff labels. So remember, the piano instrument here is showing a group name. It's not actually showing staff names. There are staff names that exist for the individual staffs, but they don't have labels. So Finale is using the generic numbering that it comes up with for these staffs, and sometimes I really can't figure out how they come up with these staff numbers, but in this case it's staff 3 and staff 26. It's showing these staff names here just so you can identify what they are. However, these will not print, so don't worry about if this is showing. You're not going to see staff 3 on your printed score. The same thing applies for the group names. Now, as I talked about in the group videos previously, every group gets an identifying number, and that you can see here. There's group 8, and the group name, which is now just this group number, will always appear centered on the group. So this group 8 is actually the subgroup for the flutes here. This group 4 is actually kind of centered on the entire woodwind group. That's what this huge bracket is. Group 18 is the subgroup for the clarinet, and group 27 is a subgroup for the bassoon. So this is, again, just letting you identify the group name for the particular groups that you have set up. And once again, these will not ever print, so you don't have to worry about, if you have these things checked, those numbers are not going to print. Now, I usually just leave these off unless for some reason I need to, temporarily turn those on just to identify a particular group number or a staff number. That's how I would do that. But otherwise, they will not print. All right, so I know this video's been getting a little long, but there's a lot to do with staff names and group names, so hopefully this has helped a lot, and we'll go from here. The next video, I'm going to start talking about the positioning of the staff and group names, because there's default positionings and ways to manipulate those, as well as overrides individually and all that stuff. So definitely a lot more to talk about with staff and group names, so come back for that. All right, once again, thanks for watching. My name is Jason. This has been Staff Tool Strategies video on staff and group names. I appreciate you joining me, and come back soon, and I will see you on the next video.